Meet Joe. Joe's your everyday, average kind of guy, except for one little fact. Joe's a world-class race car driver. Now, as good as Joe is at driving cars, he still has a lot to learn about the physics behind his craft. Now, when Joe was young, he always had trouble getting out of bed in the morning. It happened so often that Joe's mother would always tell him that he had too much inertia, because it was impossible to get him to move out of his bed. Now, Joe never gave much thought about it when he was young, but Joe developed quite the curiosity when he found his passion in driving. He soon began to question what his mother had told him. What is inertia? And how does it relate to the difficulty of getting out of bed in the morning? To get a better understanding of the concept of inertia, Joe decided that he would ask his teachers at the driving school that he went to. Newton's first law of motion, or the law of inertia as it's better known, is a simple concept that can be seen every day in the world around you. The best examples of inertia can be found in cars, as they are constantly accelerating and decelerating in different directions. The objects in cars always seem to oppose the motion of the car itself. In Joe's car, we can see this in the cross hanging from his mirror and the water bottles in his passenger seat. But before we explain why these objects move in the way that they do, let's first give the formal definition of Newton's first law of motion. Newton's first law states that an object at rest tends to stay at rest, and an object in motion tends to stay in motion in an inertial reference frame. This holds true while there's no net unbalanced force acting upon the object. Now, back to the objects in Joe's car. The cross hanging from the mirror appears to move backwards as the car accelerates forwards. In reality, the cross is actually resisting the motion of the car and is trying to stay at rest. This results in the appearance of it accelerating backwards from the inside of the car, when it really is just maintaining its resting state until the tension in the string and gravity provide a net unbalanced force. A similar effect can be seen with the water bottle in Joe's passenger seat. As Joe accelerates around corners, the water bottle appears to accelerate in the opposite direction, while in reality it is demonstrating its tendency to stay at rest relative to the world around the car. These objects are both commonplace illustrations of the law of inertia in a day-to-day setting. But there is one more thing in Joe's car that illustrates the law of inertia. His seatbelt. The seatbelt in Joe's car is an important safety measure that helps prevent the consequences of the law of inertia. In the event of an abrupt stop, Newton's first law would result in Joe, who's in motion, staying in motion, and crashing through his windshield. The seatbelt provides the net and balanced force needed to keep Joe safe when his car decelerates quickly. Now, back to Joe's story. When Joe got to the driver's school, he knew just who to ask about the concept of inertia. He decided that he would ask Mr. Krillins, who had a PhD in ACP, also known as Advanced Car Physics. Mr. Krillins explained the basic concept of inertia to Joe in reference to the objects in Joe's car, which explained why Joe's mother always told him that he had a lot of inertia when he couldn't get out of bed. Joe was the object at rest that tended to stay at rest until the net unbalanced force, or in this example, his mother, acted upon him. Now, Mr. Krillins also provided an experiment to explore another aspect of Newton's first law, the effects of mass on the amount of inertia an object has. When Joe performed the experiment, he saw that when a moving object ran into an object at rest with little mass, the resting object moved at a quick speed away from the initial moving object. This indicates that the resting object with low mass had a low amount of inertia, as it was easier to overcome its tendency to stay at rest. In contrast, when the same moving object collided with a resting object with a higher mass, the resting object moved away at a slow speed, indicating that an increase in mass produces an increase in inertia. This makes heavier objects harder to move from rest and harder to stop when moving. After thanking Mr. Krillins for the lesson on inertia, Joe soon left the driver's school and started to drive to the local race car track for his daily practice. Unfortunately for Joe, he wasn't paying close attention to the road and he crashed straight into a wall, wrecking his car. Luckily, Joe got away without any major injuries. Joe took this as a sign and decided that he would do everything that he could to prevent getting into another accident. Remembering what Mr. Krillins had taught him, Joe went out and bought a new car that was smaller and lighter than his previous car. With less mass to deal with, Joe's new car would be able to stop at a much quicker rate and in Joe's hands would be much safer for him. In the end, Joe's knowledge of Newton's first law of motion helped satisfy his curiosity, and helped him be a safer driver. Remember, you can't stop inertia, but you can prevent the consequences. Always remember to wear a seatbelt. This was a message brought to you by the National Association of Seatbelts.